We'll get going now. So today on this webinar, we're going to be talking about data, which is one of my favorite things. I love data. Josh loves data. Josh is one of our program strategists here at NetSertive. I'm a product manager. We're both working with data all day long, and we're really excited to share this time with you. And as we go through, before we get started, I just want to let you know, this is a very open format. If there's any questions, please type them in, and we'll respond to them as it makes sense. Yeah, with that, I think let's get going. The next slide. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking, I'm going to start with a little bit of data one-on-one just to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page about what data is. Then talking about the state of data in 2024. So there's a lot out there right now about data and GPDR and e-privacy and all these things. And we're just going to distill a little bit to show you what that really means for you, as for all of us as marketers, and what's coming in 2024, 2025. Go through that a little bit. And then Josh is going to talk through the data-driven customer journey. So, when we're looking at our customers, what does data really mean? How can we use that data to give a better experience for everybody? And then last of all, we're going to talk about maintaining your data, how to have a strategy that makes sense, ongoing, especially with a lot of these changes that are coming. So I'm super excited to talk through all of it with you.
Yeah, and this is just a sneak peek of some of the clients that we get to work with, an overview of our company as a whole. Our expertise, excuse me, is in hyperlocal digital marketing, both for individual locations and franchise networks, and everything in between. And so we assist clients with everything from paid media to organic SEO, local listings. Lots of things, programmatic ads and all of that. So we've got our fingers on a little bit of everything, a pretty wide variety of verticals and clients that we work with. We're a Google partner, and so we're deeply invested in this space. Like Ozzer said, we love data. We both love data, and so we're excited to have the conversation today. So this is just an overview of us as a company, who we work with, and just an example of the breadth of types of businesses that we've worked with, and what we're going to talk about regarding data today applies across the board.
Yeah. So first of all, I thought I'd get started with talking about what data is. So we hear a lot, these days from a technology space about big data, about data science, and all these words sometimes can sound kind of scary. And I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, data is just information, right? It's something we've all been dealing with since we went to school, and we're like, hey, what's your name? My name's Jimmy. My name's Joe, whatever. Like that's data, right? That's data being collected on the sheet. Attendance here, that's data. So at the end of the day, I won't go into like the Webster's defines it as, but data is just information. And that's something that I really wanted to clarify. And we're going to talk about how to use the different types of data, what it means for marketing. But I wanted to set that as the baseline for what we're talking about here. All right, so these are the terms we often hear when we talk about data. We hear about first-party data, third-party data, and the new thing is zero-party data. And I wanted to actually illustrate this with an example. So let's take the same thing. Like, hi, my name is Joe, right? So let's say you run a store, a physical store. Somebody comes into your store and says, hey, my name is Joe. That would be zero-party data. This person has, voluntarily given you this information. You haven't asked for it. It's just, they've just given it to you. Now that would be zero-party data. On the other hand, let's say this person walks in and there's a little sign up sheet at the door for whatever it may be, and it says name, and they write in Joe. That would be first-party data, because that's data that you've sort of asked for. They filled it in and they've given it to you as a business. Second-party data, which we don't hear about a lot, would be if, let's say you have another store. Let's say you sell barbecues. The person beside you sells lawnmowers, and they say, hey, there's like the person beside you says, hey, that's Joe, he's my customer, he bought a lawnmower. That's second party data, because you've heard it from this other person, Joe's information, right? Third party data would be something where you bought a list somewhere, you read on some directory, Joe is a person who's interested in my service. So those are really the different types of data when we're talking about here. So again, it's nothing, a lot of these technology terms make it sound really obtuse, difficult, but at the end of the day, it's just how you're getting that information. And so these things are super relevant when we're talking about technology because how you get the information explains what you can do with it. And as you would imagine, the best type of data is the data that has a lower number because they're more likely they're giving you that information. The user is comfortable with it. It's either more intentionally shared. And so we always want to be in a space where we're getting to that zero party data essentially. You want to be such a great brand that people are just coming up to you and giving you their information. Not always realistic, especially when we're talking about a competitive landscape, especially in the digital world. But we want to get to that first party data, that zero party data. And yeah, you can look at this chart later. I won't belabor the point, but that's the general idea of these different types of data and where we want to get to. Yeah. And what is a cookie? So cookies, they sound so great. They sound so fun. I had too many chocolate chip cookies today. I was getting hyped up for this webinar. We always hear about them in the same context of, first party cookie, third party cookie, what the heck's a cookie? And so I want to break that down a little bit here. So you'll see this also. Do you accept cookies? Do you reject cookies? So a cookie essentially is just it's a text file with a bunch of information, right? So a cookie on your site may say, hey, this person came from Google. He clicked on 2 pages. He did this thing. And it's basically a log of what happened, where you came from and what you've done on the site. So similarly, this can be first party cookies, information that you're sort of capturing on your site. So let's say, again, you sell barbecues, you have joesbarbecue.com, and user goes there, he clicks places, he does things, that could be stored in a cookie. Or third-party cookie would be if you got that information from somewhere else. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to cookies there. And so what do these things really mean, right? So now that we've set this sort of 101, why does data matter in 2024? I mean, data's always mattered, but why does it particularly matter now? So over the last few years, since 2020, there's been this push to for consumer privacy, for just not just willy-nilly using people's data, which is a good thing. I think a lot of times we sort of put on our marketing hats and we forget our human hats. And as humans, we don't want our data to be just everywhere and collected. And so I don't think we should look a lot of these changes with a negative thing. We should look at it as a challenge. These are great things we can do, right? Now we can focus more on building better trust with our customers, so they can more likely to give us data, so that we live in a better society. Not to be too cliche there. And so you've heard, probably third-party cookies are going away. So Google first announced this in 2020 that they're going to phase them out. They've been continually delaying, and Josh and I were talking this morning. We're seeing information that again they're going to delay it. So they said it was going to be third-party cookies were going to go away mid-2024. Now they've said no. There's too much going on. We can't do it in 2024. We're actually going to potentially do it in 2025. So these are things that are important to be aware of, because when these third-party cookies go away, it is going to make a substantial difference. Sorry, 1 second. My headphone keeps falling out. I'm just going to take it off there. Right. So these things are going away, and a lot of businesses right now rely on third-party cookies, to track their information, to deliver information. And so these are things that as a business you have to be aware of. And we're going to talk about, what exactly you need to do. But these are the things that are changing. And some of these acts are GDPR, which is sort of EU, California Consumer Protection Act, which is in California, PIPTA, which is in Canada. And see, these are things that you need to be prepared of, especially PIPTA. I'm actually from Canada. I'm from Toronto. People don't talk about it. And a lot of franchise businesses that have organizations in Canada actually need to comply to these legislations. And these are actually very similar to GDPR. And so these different legislations and acts that are coming out in different states, different areas that you might operate in, are things you need to be aware of, because it's just getting more and more intense. And while Google's pushed it another year, at some point they are going to phase those out. And other avenues that we work with, that you may work with, like Microsoft, Facebook, all these things are also trying to be more and more secure. So these are things that we do need to be prepared for going forward. Yeah. All right. And so how do you get prepared? What does this all mean? So at the end of the day, it all comes down to consent. And so consent, as we all know, means that the person says yes, and you explicitly ask them, right? So the kind of questions that we need to ask for our website when it comes to consent are, what cookies do you have on your site? What level of consent do you need? Do you have a robust data policy? And are you compliant with these regulations? So these questions are really, really critical. And these are things that that we need to be asking on a continuous basis, and it's difficult to do this if you don't have a full policy around it. A lot of you, I presume, use GTM or something similar like that to deploy your tags, your scripts, things working on your site, things from Facebook. And GTM actually now has a consent mode, which tells you every time you deploy a script, hey, what kind of information is this script getting, right? Is this storage? Is this analytics? Is this functional? And that can seem like it's called advanced consent mode. That can be a lot of work. But thankfully, there are ways sort of to make this a little bit easier. So there's a whole slew of different consent management platforms. Some of them are paid, some of them are free, that sort of just give you that little nice pop-up that you may have seen on a lot of sites that says, hey, do you accept cookies? Hey, do you accept cookies? Reject cookies? What do these different cookies mean? So one of the things we're recommending to a lot of our clients that may be like a must, depending on when this legislation rolls out, is to work with one of these consent management platforms, and that's something NetCertif can help you with. That's something really you can do on your own as well, because if you don't have this consent set up, it's very possible that a lot of the functionality that you're currently relying on for your site, for getting that information to ads, to analytics, may stop working. Again, once this legislation is in place. So biggest thing in terms of like, what do you have to do for 2024? In this sphere is have something with consent management, because it'll just make your life easier. Yeah, and if you go to the next things there, Sydney. Yeah, so you'll see here, a lot of these consent management tools also give you a lot of data about data. That tells you really, I have these different types of scripts, which cookies are being used, which aren't being used. And that can also help inform your sort of your policy in terms of, hey, I'm asking users to give me all this information. They're always saying no. And that's really good information, because that may mean that you should change the way you're collecting information. You may want to change, how you're marketing, how you're presenting information, because if users aren't giving you that information, it's not going to work, right? So this is not just a check the box exercise. It's actually something that can be helpful in you better understanding your customers and, developing a better strategy as well. Yeah. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about how to create that data-driven customer journey and what that really looks like. So data is something that is part and parcel of every piece of this journey. The customer journey is going from awareness to loyalty. And everyone's sort of seen some variation of this slide. And this can be a lot of things. It's not as easy as, as I mentioned, Joe going up to the barbecue store, buying a barbecue, leaving. In 2024 and for the last 10 years, there's a lot more that comes into it, right? So you have this awareness stage, which may take, maybe PR, maybe radio, maybe CTV, and then it goes to consideration with the website, social media, and then they purchase, the post-purchase activities, and all of these pieces you're collecting or you're working with data in some way. And so it's really critical to have a strategy that follows the data throughout this path, because when you sort of isolate it, you only collect data, let's say at the awareness stage, that's not really doing you any favors, and it may not be, the best thing for your customers as well. So now Josh is going to talk, actually, no, I think on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do this. Let's go there. Yeah. So we at NetCertif actually have created a really nice data audit where you can go through and check off, am I working here? Am I not working here? And then you can get a result here to see what your overall data score is. And obviously the higher score, the better. And I super encourage you to go through it, not just for NetCertif, but just in general, because it is going to be super effective in terms of how you're working with data and to see how mature you are as a data organization, which is something that really as marketers, we have to be. Personally, when I talk about marketing, I'm really, really focused on the brand, on the creative, and all these like exciting things that are more like Mad Men style. But these days, you really have to be focused on these tactical things as well, and making sure that, the commas are in the right place, the dots are in the right place. And this is the kind of thing this audit will really help you understand. Because once you have this data and once you really, are able to understand your customer, then we can focus on those bigger picture things, which I know, gets people a lot more excited, even though I think both those things are equally valuable for sure. So yeah, this link's in the chat. I think Lori just shared it. Please make a copy and, have fun.
Yeah, cool. All right. I'm going to jump into sort of a practical application of everything Oscar just talked about now. And we'll look at this from a few different angles. I love that we're doing this webinar. Oscar just said, like, when he's thinking about marketing, he's thinking about like all the exciting stuff. And that's definitely a huge piece of it. When I think about marketing, especially in the last few years, I think about data, and to me, data is not boring. I know it can sound boring. Data is intensely interesting to me. I could just watch people break down data in all kinds of different ways all day long. I love it. I love being able to slice and dice things and look at things differently. So I'm really excited about this. So we're going to look at this in practical terms, and hopefully it will be as exciting to you as it is to me after this, if maybe just a little bit. So we're going to look at an example of a client that might walk into a business, and the different touch points we have, the different ways we can approach that, the different ways we can collect data along the way, and then how we can pivot on that and use that later. So the example we've got here, just very generic. We've got Megan Millennial. She's a mom in Seattle. She is in the top 25th or top 25% percentile of household income. She wants to save time with some weekly house cleaning. She is budget conscious, but she wants good work done, right? And so this obviously it's never going to be linear. It's never going to be in this direct order. But we're going to look at a few different touch points exemplified by this little timeline that we've got here. So Sydney, if we move to the next page, we'll dig in. So talking about awareness, we've got a few different buckets here that we're going to talk about: awareness, consideration, conversions. And so talking about awareness, she is starting her research process and she wants to know, who are the best house cleaners near me? What's the best house cleaning business near me? She runs some searches. Maybe along the way she sees some ads, but she clicks on a local article. So that's organic content. She clicks on a local article that talks about the top cleaners, top cleaning businesses in her neighborhood or in her area. Maybe from there, she says, all right, I have a good idea of who does good work. So she moves on to look at average rates for those businesses, that type of service in her area. From there, so now she's got a little bit of information about who's out there. She has information about what the pricing ranges might be. So then she looks at one of those businesses specifically. Maybe she clicks through an ad at this point. She goes to that business's website and finds out what their rates specifically would be, and maybe gets a little more information about that specific business. So this is one example of how front end awareness can help bring a customer all the way down through the funnel to where they're actually on your website making a decision about your services, and not just the type of services that you provide. They're making a decision about you. So we need to be able to track each of those touch points, though, at the top of the funnel. We have to be able to identify trends. We need to see, where are they coming from mostly? What is the path of least resistance in that upper funnel to get them down to a decision point? And all of it has to be hyper local in order to be the most effective for your business. So this is again, the top of the funnel. This next slide here, we're going to talk about different types of audiences. So when we're talking about data, this in practical terms, this in practical application, this is what we're talking about. So building different audiences. These are, again, just some examples, because there are almost infinite ways you can slice and dice this data, which I think is awesome. But let's start at the top. So we're going to talk about custom audiences. This is what you probably think about most readily when you're thinking about paid media or paid advertising. So this is building audiences based on keywords, visits to certain websites, usage of apps, maybe a little bit of interest targeting in here as well. This is some of the top of funnel, more broad targeting that we can do to kind of bring people in, make people aware of our business, and then again, follow those users around, stay top of mind, and use that data later on. Affinity audiences. So this is getting into that third-party territory, which may or may not go away sometime in the near future, or may become more and more limited, and probably will sometime in the near future. But this is targeting users based on what they're passionate about, what they're interested in. Google has started a couple of years ago. They segmented users into what they called FLOC, federated learning of cohorts. And so it was more aggregated and less individually based. And so they put users into interest groups. So it'd be like motorcycle enthusiasts or, sports enthusiasts, field hockey, whatever the case may be. And so this is targeting audiences based on habits and interests. In market, the next step down is a little more specific. That's targeting users based on recent search history, online activity, that kind of thing. So if I have browsed websites related to motorcycles, maybe I'm looking for a part for my motorcycle, maybe I need make, I can't fix it myself. I need to have it worked on. Maybe I'm looking to upgrade something. I don't know why I'm using motorcycles. I'm not into motorcycles. I should use my PC as an example here instead. But if I'm looking for something like that, that online activity is being tracked by someone, whether I like it or not, definitely by Google or whatever browser I'm using. And so I'm getting put in interest categories based on that activity and not just things that Google knows I'm interested in based on far, far past activity or maybe purchases I've made in the past or things like that. And then the bottom of this funnel, some of the most powerful audience building and segmentation that you can do is remarketing. Now, again, I know this sounds probably obvious because remarketing is that's data you've collected directly from folks that have interacted with your business, folks that have purchased from you or used your services in the past. So you have their information, you can reach directly back out to them. But the reason that's so powerful is that those remarketing audiences can also be things like, if you have a pet store and somebody purchased a toy that is generally for younger dogs and puppies, you can create an audience based on that, target those same folks with other products that would probably be good for puppies, whether it's a specialized food or training tools or things like that. And you can tap back into that audience to reactivate purchasers or users of your services from years ago, and maybe they just lapsed as a customer. So that's often a really, really efficient and untapped revenue stream in a lot of cases, depending on how you're segmenting that data. And that can really boost revenue and also, again, increase awareness and keep you top of mind for those customers. All right, so now let's look at consideration. So we have made ourselves visible to a potential purchaser or client. And so now we need to make sure that we're competing in the marketplace, we're staying relevant, and we're staying top of mind. So maybe from all of that research previously, she has already visited this website. She maybe has asked for a little bit of information. And so now she's visiting a specific location page, the location page specific to her area. She signs up for a newsletter to get 50% off. Great tactic. Offer an incentive for folks to submit their data to you. That helps you create a relationship again. And they're incentivized. It's kind of a no-brainer for the customer, even if they never use your services or don't use your services within the time frame that you're expecting. You have that data you can keep top of mind. So then from there, she looks at reviews. She's not quite ready to pull the trigger yet. She wants to make sure that the company she's looking at is reputable. They do good work. So she wants to see what other people are saying about them. Maybe that leads her to a social page. In the meantime, she sees another ad in her inbox via email because she signed up for the newsletter. And then maybe she gets retargeted by a connected TV ad, a streaming ad, a display ad somewhere along the way. We're staying top of mind. And so again, along the way, we're auditing all of these touch points. We're seeing what kind of trends are happening. What is the path of least resistance to get her to actually get to a point where she's ready, confident, comfortable making a decision. We want to make sure that we're using the context and interest checkboxes to segment leads. We want to make sure we're understanding where she's seeing our ads, what would make sense to show her next. And we're contextualizing our ads and messaging depending on where she's seeing those ads. And then again, the obvious, retargeting her with, emails, text messages, if she's signed up for this, offers, search ads, display ads, all of that, just staying top of mind, not being too pushy, but creating a little bit of urgency, maybe keeping those offers in front of, this user and making sure that we're competing in the space, staying relevant and earning that business. All right. And then a couple more here. So this is the point of purchase. So she's ready now. She's seen a ton of information. She goes directly back to the website. So we don't, this is not an ad. She's already visited the website. She probably has the URL in her recent history. She goes right back. She requests a quote. She gets the quote and pulls the trigger. She decides to use Proline, and ta-da, we have a happy customer. We have completed that journey for her on the front end, but we're not done. So now we've got purchase information. We've got a closed lead, a closed sale. And so now what we can do is we can see, all right, this is a user that has completed the journey. They have become a customer. let's look back at that entire history, that entire road that got her to that point. And let's make sure we understand the different touch points, maybe some different thresholds. Maybe you're tracking the initial proposal request, and then maybe you're tracking the estimate created, and then maybe you're so there are different touch points along the way. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding what our lead to close ratios are, but our lead to estimate ratios or lead to proposal ratios and things like that, to make sure that we can optimize every single step in this journey. And we can even bid against those different steps in the journey to make sure that we're bidding more efficiently as well. We want to make sure that we're capturing key decisions around the purchase. What led her to actually using our services and not somebody else's? And then again, resegmenting those leads to customers, segmentation, those portions of the journey to update our campaigns based on the trends we're seeing so that we can stay adaptive and mobile. And then lastly, like I said, our job is not done. So she's used our services once. Maybe she's signed up for, a few months or something like that. But we want to make sure that we're keeping her as a customer as well. It's far cheaper to keep a current customer than it is to acquire a new one. I think we all understand that. And so we want to make sure that we're thanking her for being a customer. Maybe we set up birthday lists and send out offers on birthdays. Maybe we offer a referral bonus or something like that for her to refer other friends. Word of mouth is extremely powerful. So these are ways that we can keep engaged with our current customer base. We're talking about remarketing campaigns. This is all part of that. We want to make sure that we're incentivizing her not only to refer other friends, but remain a customer, and also provide feedback. This gives Megan Millennial a chance to give us feedback on how we're doing, what we could do better. And having that constant stream of communication helps us understand, is she happy with us? Do we need to be better? Do we need to change something? And that will keep her engaged, and those loyalty programs go a long, long way. Great. So 2 things that I'm going to show you just really quickly. This is not a pitch at all, but something that I think we're very, very proud of. So you need to be able not only to collect all that data, it needs to not only be visible, but you need to be able to manage that data. So, maybe it's in your CRM, hopefully, or other tools that you have. But one of the things that is vital here is being able to see, who these folks are, where they're coming from. Maybe you have a form fill on your website that's very important to you. And so being able to segment completed lead forms by zip code or by ad group or by campaign, whatever the case may be, area code, things like that. So being able to manage the data on the other end is extremely important. Our platform allows this. So this is a view of our form submits portion of the platform, one of the pieces of that. And so clicking on any singular entry in here will show you, name, date, email address, the campaign it came from, ad group, address, any comments that came with that form fill, tracking parameters, all that kinds of things. So you'll be able to see on an individual basis where these leads came from, what ad groups and campaigns they came from, geo and all of that, just as another way to make sure that you're staying on top of not only what leads you're getting, but where they're coming from, and making sure that your campaigns are efficient and understanding which campaigns are performing, which maybe need tweaked. The next slide is another version of this, but for phone calls. And so here you can see, again, where phone calls came from, who the customer was, but you can also listen to those phone calls and make sure that those incoming calls are being handled correctly. That can help identify trends and help you be more efficient in how leads are getting handled as well. Cool.
Yeah,
now we're going to talk about. Sorry, I was going to say, now we're going to talk about maintaining data, which is the everything we just talked about was collecting and using data. This, though, maintaining your data is at the core of that, being able to make sure that you've got it, it's easily accessible and ready to go.
Yeah, and I want to also add on to the form, calls there, that it's really good for making sure calls are being handled correctly, but it's also, I've listened to a lot of customer calls in my life, probably too many, just because I find that there's so much good qualitative information you can get there just about what's working, what's not working. And so again, when we're talking about data, it's this sort of quantitative thing. They're like bits and bytes and whatnot, but it's also real information about real people, right? So I would really encourage you, if you everyone listening, if you have the opportunity even to spend like 5 minutes, 10 minutes just listening to a customer call, listening to a few, you might be surprised at what you learned, because there's been a number of times where there's just little nuggets that come from there that like totally change, like for us, especially at a corporate level when we're not interacting with customers, we don't always get that connection. And so phone calls are a really good version of that, because you can hear certain things like, a little bit of annoyance, a little bit of happiness, little things in tone that can really change how what your demographic profile might look like, how your customers really think of you. So phone calls are so important. Form submits are good, but voice is just different. So I think this is so important. And I encourage everyone to use this data, not just operationally, but also from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, and if I can add just one more thing to that, because you reminded me, Azar. True story. Sometimes we have clients that will tell us that they're getting phone calls from folks that think they are a different business, same vertical, just a different business. And they want to find a way to shut that off, to stop that from happening. And I understand that, honestly, from a certain point of view. But often our response is, that's a perfect opportunity for you to grab that business, claw back some market share and some business from a competitor. And so that's an opportunity to retrain some staff, or if you have a call center, to help retrain the call center to be able to handle those calls and turn that customer from a competitor customer to your customer, and buy your product or use your service. So just one example of the way listening to phone calls and hearing what people are saying can help you change a little bit of your marketing tactics and earn some incremental revenue that maybe you would not have otherwise.
Yeah, and I know we keep, I'm going to add another point. I know we keep elaborating this, but I think it's so important, because again, it is like real information. A lot of these things you can actually do programmatically now. You can use, depending on sort of the call tracking system you're using, you can do sentiment analysis. You can do, hey, watch out if someone uses these keywords. You may put in the keywords of your competitors. And so it's not that you have to listen to all, you have 16 calls here, but if you're talking about 100 locations, 16 calls each, that's a lot of calls, right? You can do this stuff programmatically now, where you can be like, hey, if abc.com gets mentioned, give me a list of all these calls. And maybe you can use that in your remarketing. Be like, hey, these people all have this other customer, they're all talking about this other client. What can we do here? Can we give some sort of offer that maybe we'll give you a discount if you switch over? There's just so much you can do with phone calls. It's really, really valuable data.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've
yeah, I'm done.
Said
no
what
more.
we had to say. Yeah. And then talking about this data, so I'm a programming guy. So data is great in these marketing systems, but really it's everywhere. And so it's really important that your data is consistent throughout your flow and where this goes through, for your collecting a digital presence, your advertising, your technology. There's so much that can be done here in terms of integrations. And it makes me sad when I, work with a client and they have like phenomenal data in one system. And then I talk to another part of that company, and they have no idea about this data, and they're operating in a totally different way, right? And that's just, there's so much missed opportunity there. And so I'd really encourage you to have a data policy, and we'll talk about this on the next slide as well, and talk about data throughout your organization, and make sure that you're integrating that data. There's no silos. Often a common silo I'll see is that people will do email stuff, let's say in MailChimp, and then they'll have a separate CRM, Marketo, HubSpot, FranConnect, whatever it may be, and those systems don't talk to each other. And that's a real shame, because there's so many things you can do better if those are working in the same system. And it doesn't always make sense to have one system, but integrations exist, programming exists. And I'd really encourage you, if you don't have a more, technical look at your data and at your systems, to do so, yourself or with a partner, because you may be surprised just how many benefits you can get just with more consistent data throughout your sort of infrastructure. Yeah.
Cool. And this is just a quick look at, maybe what an example CRM entry might look like, but the different things that you can pull out of that just one CRM entry. And this is pretty bare bones, if we're being honest, as far as like how much data and what kinds of data you can collect. But you've got, personalized emails. Obviously, you've got your client's or customer's name and their contact info. So everything should be personalized. You've got a phone number here, so that's opportunity. Again, if they've opted in and you've been able to collect this along the way, to do SMS marketing and maybe some very low cost efficient touch points there. You obviously have a physical address here, if you've collected that, and so you can do some mailers as well. Maybe send them a coupon in the mail. On the other side, you've got some of the more like time-based data entries. So their first date of service, and you can send them a, maybe a nice little email or a mailer or a text or something like that and say, hey, like, it's our 1 year anniversary. Just, you can be a little cheeky and cute with it, because they are your customer. They know you, they have a relationship with you. And maybe you're sending out an offer, or maybe you're just reminding them, hey, like, you've been a customer for a year. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Please let us know if there's anything else you need. Or last date of service. Again, this one is really, really important, because if you're going back to those remarketing lists and you want to try and get some incremental revenue, one of the biggest ways to do that is to grab lapsed customers that maybe have used your services for a while and then fell off. Re-engage those folks, find out why they went away, find out what it would take to get them back as customers. That's very, very low cost, very efficient, and it's a good source of some extra incremental revenue. And then we talked about birthday offers, possibly. And then you can save preferences from each of these customers as well. Do they prefer to be contacted by phone or email? Are they a loyalty member if you have a loyalty program, or are they not? Are they interested in seasonal promotions, or are they not? Where do they usually interact with you most? Is it on social? Is it on your website directly? All of those things can be entered here as well. And all of this is informing not only the trends that you saw in acquiring this customer, but it can inform all of the ways that you roll out the rest of your marketing plans moving forward, and the way you're segmenting all of these data. You can segment based on all these different pieces, and put together some really interesting lists. Again, we talked about ways to re-engage customers that have bought one thing that may be interested in other things from you, lapsed customers, or just points of very good efficiency or points of failure along the marketing funnel as well that you can tweak.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add here is that, as Josh mentioned, I'm just going to stay on the last slide. As Josh mentioned, that that CRM information we had there was relatively basic, and so sometimes we sort of I see people get stuck, like, hey, I already have these 8 pieces of information about this person. That's all I can know. One thing that's really useful here is progressive form fields. And so what that means is that if let's say you already know their name, their phone, their address, and you're like, all right, this person's coming back to the site. This is generally more valuable for bigger purchases. You might ask them a different piece of information. You might mark them, hey, I know this is Megan. I know Megan's first date of service. I don't know her last date of service, right? And then that's the form that they'll see. Or you can ask them other information just about their general interests. And so every time they come to the site, it's not just the same thing. You're slowly building a better profile of them. And so again, this is generally more useful for bigger purchases. But at the end of the day, you can know a lot about this person. And they only had to come to the site. And every time they just entered in like 2 fields or 3 fields. And that's something I've seen have really, really good success at building out that full profile and having, being able to market so much in a much more personalized way, which is always, the gold standard of what you can do. As much as you can personalize it without being creepy, the better it is.
Yeah, and that can be on the website. It can be through email. But all of these customer segments that you're building from CRM lists and customer data can show up as maybe a quick pop-up on the website. Again, as I said, asking one or 2 of those questions. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's just confirming that they're still interested in something that they have told you they're interested in before, if it's been 6, 8 months, a year, something like that. But all powered, again, by the data.
100%. All right, so these are some last sort of tips to keep your data clean. So before I say data clean, it's like, what is dirty data? So dirty data essentially will be something that is inaccurate. It might be typed wrong. It might be, you have a zip code field that has spaces in it, so it doesn't really make sense. It's data that is miscategorized. There's lots of ways that data can be incorrect. So it's really important to keep your data clean. It's not just having it. It's not just having it integrated. If the data isn't usable at the end of the day, it's not going to do much for you. And so a few things you can do here is have a named data champion. And that sounds very like cool, data champ. Well, I think it sounds cool. Maybe people think it sounds lame being a champion of data. But essentially what that means is a person in your organization who is, or it could be in a certain business unit, who's responsible for the data. That's the person that's going to be, at the end of the day, yes, the data is correct. Yes, the data is linked. And it's important to have one person because, again, if you have 8 different systems, everyone might think the data is right within their own silo. But if they can't connect together, it's not super useful. So it's really important to have a single data champion who really owns that across the org or across the unit, depending on what makes sense for you. Second, establish data standards in your SOPs so that every time you're having a customer interaction, you're collecting data in a specific way. You're making sure you're collecting the key data fields that you can use in your overall marketing efforts. Because if you don't have those standards, and you may have 8 people on your team, 5 of them collect them in one way, 3 of them are doing it another way, then you can't do those marketing campaigns at scale in a way that you really want to. So having data standards is super critical. And I know that sounds, oh, why do we need to have that with people? Because it's all digitized, it's all filling it in an email. But a lot of data also comes in through phone calls, as we talked about, right? A lot of it could come in person. Data is really one of the things I want to highlight here is data is everywhere, and each of these touch points, as Josh sort of walked through. And so having those data standards in each SOP, in each of those different steps is super important. And sort of similarly, have training for your employees, talk to them about why data is important. I've also worked with a lot of people who just put in, fake data, birthday January 1st, because they're like, oh, it doesn't matter what the data is. But that data is really useful, even for things like birthday emails, like Josh mentioned. That can be so important for your loyalty program. So making sure that your employees understand the importance of your data. Put guardrails in place to have required fields in your CRM. So make sure that, if you need email, which everyone needs, that's required to be in your CRM. So email is kind of an obvious one, but there's also other ones, like, as we mentioned, last date of service might be something that's super, super useful. And if you don't have that as a required field, you might get a lot of entries without that. And so it's really important to be very thoughtful about your required fields, especially when we're talking about, let's say, from a website, because you don't want to have everything be required, because then people might not fill it in. So it's something to be really thoughtful about, not just, the default that comes in, first name, last name, email is required, everything else is whatever. So just be very thoughtful about how you're constructing these things, and what it makes sense for your overall efforts. Conduct data audits on a schedule. So you might have good data today. Doesn't mean you're going to have good data 6 months from now. Doesn't mean you're going to have good data 2 years from now. So make sure you're continually looking at your data and making sure that it makes sense. This is useful for your marketing, but also generally for your website, to make sure that you're not getting duplicated information, you're not missing information. Data audits are something that really everyone should do. I would say once a quarter would be sort of ideal. But even if you can do it a couple times a year, it can make a big difference in terms of your overall efforts. And then last but not least, share your insights with your team. Don't keep it in a silo. Do webinars like we're doing right now, maybe internally, and just talk about all the amazing, wonderful things you can do with data. And I think with that, we are at time, but we'll go to the slide there. If there's any questions, you can let us know now, but again, we're at time. Feel free to email us, info@netcertive there right now, and then we can definitely get back to you and we can talk nerdy about data.
Our favorite thing.
Definitely. Cool. I don't